Hi, guys, and welcome back to Confessions of a Wannabe It Girl. And in Wannabe It Girl fashion, we are diving into a common term we throw around these days, which is I am so triggered. There is so much weight around this conversation of being triggered, triggering people. Honestly, it goes on. And in this conversation, we are joined by Sonni, an Emmy nominated and AP award winning journalist with 15 years of experience as a TV anchor and reporter, a lifestyle and mommy blogger, and the host of We Gotta Talk podcast. In this episode, as I said, we're talking about being triggered, why we get so triggered, what that says about ourselves, what does that say about maybe the culture at this point. We touch on cancel culture, and we talk about really how to share our views respectfully, opening the door to hearing other people's views. So let's dive in. Welcome to Confessions of a Wannabe It Girl. I'm your host, Marley Freigang, and I'm here to help you filter out all the bullshit and become the next It Girl. This podcast explores the reality of what it really takes to make it out there. As it turns out, it is way less Instagrammable than I thought it was going to be. I'm still very much a work in progress, but there's simply nothing else I'd rather be doing than chasing my dreams. So let's learn from my mistakes and work together to achieve our dreams with more confidence, clarity, and direction. Let's get after it. All right. Well, I am so excited to dive into this topic with you. And you know, this could be kind of a topic that is interesting because we're talking about being triggered. And so do you have like a unique background? And that's why I think you can handle this topic so well. I mean, you've worked as a newscaster, you are a mom, you are a podcaster, you've been nominated for an Emmy. So you really have a large scope of handling uncomfortable topics. And, you know, also, I'm sure as a newscaster, you would hear things and be like, I don't want to take this home with me, but I need to hear it, or I have an opinion. And, you know, it's part of not saying it. So why are we so triggered by media?
We could talk about this for hours. Okay, well, let's start by saying that I do, especially having been a working journalist in TV for 15 years, and I consider myself a journalist still, even in the digital space, which I've been in for like 7.5-ish years. The role of good journalism is so important. And the thing about it too is, like you said, you really can't sugarcoat life, which is essentially what news is, right? It's the best and the worst. It's keeping track of things. It's asking questions that need to be asked when things seem to be going wrong. And so I think my job gave me that unique perspective of being able to expose myself to different opinions, to truly live outside of an echo chamber, because it was my job for so long to interview, you know, respectfully and professionally people that I just really didn't agree with or understand a lot. I can remember doing tons of interviews with politicians that, you know, that stood for things that I personally would not vote for, that I personally would not support at the ballot. And what I learned is that when I was challenged to sort of defend my own beliefs, and in that case, I was just sort of defending them internally because I would never, you know, unprofessionally, I could ask them challenging questions, but I could never present my opinion in an unprofessional way when I was working as a professional. It taught me, number one, that, and this is a little glass half full, but bear with me, that we do have so much more in common than we do differently, like as humans, right? If we're taking it down to that level. And number two, even if at the end of the day, I'm not listing the same exact set of beliefs on my whatever list of priorities that you are, it's important for me to understand what my hypothetical opponents or philosophical opponents are thinking, because it helps me to affirm why I believe what I believe even more. And that's why even on the podcast now, I seek out people whose opinions I don't always necessarily agree with, because we are all better for having our own beliefs challenged. We're forced to defend them. We're forced to stand stronger in them. And in rare cases, people change their opinions. And how cool that, were it not for a difficult conversation, that someone would never maybe have learned something that ends up benefiting them in some way, or changing them in a way that they want to be changed. And so, I mean, when I say, you know, you have to try to trigger yourself, I don't want people to, you know, scroll on social media and find their like diametrically opposed, political
Sure.
representative and just like watch their content for 2 hours. But try to do a little bit of it. Try to watch the person you think you're not voting for, or try to speak with someone on the other side of the political aisle. Or it can be as simple as speaking with someone who believes something differently than you religiously and spiritually, and not with the goal of changing who you are, but helping you understand the world around you, because now more than ever, we're surrounded by people who have different belief systems, who have wildly different experiences, who've gotten to where they are in life in really different ways than us. And I think it's more important than ever to be able to interact with people respectfully, and to not be the person that's always waving the like, stop, enough flag. Like it's time to grow up. And I say that with love, because I used to not be able to talk with people without like breaking out in a rash, and I didn't fully agree with, and maybe not literally, but like getting so, and I realized the benefit that I got from seeking other opinions and beginning to engage with them respectfully, and the growth that I saw. And I think it's a gift to be able to do that. So I guess that's the basis of sort of one of the real big pillars of my podcast, is just being able to be a better sort of global citizen in some way and have conversations, because we're all different, at the end of the day.
Right. Well, and let's talk about what is media, because I think we used to say media and we'd mean television, or we'd mean the newspaper, but now media spans to social media and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the things, where we are able to self-publish, self-share our own views. And it's given us a lot to, get up there and share, which I think is a maybe good and bad thing, because we should maybe filter a little, but at the same time, like, you should be allowed to say whatever you want online and share. But why is there so many different more mediums now affecting us? I feel like, when I was a kid, we really were only maybe triggered by the news, and hearing about horrible things on your local news channel that are, it felt very, I don't even think it was the word, but clickbaity,
right,
for a news story.
Right, right. Yeah, all those teasers like right after the break, how a pothole. They're stupid.
Murdered 3 people.
Right, and you're like, what? How's that happening?
What? I must tune back.
Yeah, today's media calls on us to be more responsible than ever with our personal boundaries. So it is exactly what you said. It's both a blessing and a curse that we can access information from around the world in our fingertips. But it requires us to be, and that's why remaining sort of untriggered or accessing some of this information without feeling that physical reaction to it, which ultimately is detrimental to your own health and well-being, you have to set your personal boundaries with it and understand that the media you're consuming is maybe not all of it's true. I hate that the burden is now on us more than ever, but I would rather the burden be on us than to be on the media companies, right? I come from a traditional media world. So my background is in television journalism. I've covered everything from politics to business to health. Every type of interview that can be done, I have done. Presidential candidates and, all the way down the line to local politics and sports and severe weather and trial. We did nonstop sort of court TV style coverage of the Casey Anthony trial and the George Zimmerman trial. And so I think with the prevalence, particularly of social media, the burden is on us to do several things. Number one, try to expose yourself to other opinions. Number two, understand that what you're getting might not be 100% accurate. And you have then, if you feel strongly enough to, have to go and sort of do your own research and look at that. It's very easy for people to get on their phones and feel very strongly about something and put together a compelling reel or video that makes you think some sort of way. But if it's not based in fact, it's activating you in a direction that's sort of counterproductive in the end. So I think boundaries are really important. And I know that's hard because all we want to do is mindlessly scroll, but I like to tell people, just be aware of what you're consuming, right? It used to be easy to tell what was opinion and what was news, because all the opinion, if it was on after 7 p.m. on a cable channel, it was opinion. And that was like the old fashioned way. It's like when all the Bill O'Reillys or whoever come on. And now opinion is more infiltrated, even in traditional media, than it ever was before. It's very, very difficult to get a strict, straight source of news, right? So that can either be really daunting or really emboldening. I choose to be emboldened by it and say, okay, I know what's out there is really awash in opinion now. And it challenges me to seek out those objective sources as much as possible. And it can be as simple as, if you're reading the New York Times, read the Wall Street Journal. If you're reading the Washington Post, read the Examiner. Like, there are counterpoints, right? And I'm not saying you're going to get every opinion, but seeking out or even being aware that what you're reading might have a lean to it and trying to find its counterpoint out there in whatever space is helpful, because all it'll do for you is make you a more educated citizen of the world, whether it's for voting or for just being a human. And that's not a bad thing.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about social media, because I think triggering affects us in terms of the news, all the way down to you seeing something on social media. You know, maybe it's the typical beautiful influencer who's well off. And how do we look at that information, not be triggered by it, and still, like, you know, not need to tear that person down in our head or tear ourselves down for not being it? And like, we're starting small, but like, I think this applies to very big topics as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's all inner work, right? And one of the downsides of social media is that it makes things look really easy. But no matter how many content restrictions we set or people we block or unfollow, there are always going to be things on our feed and in real life that are difficult or triggering or hard for us. And the benefit of it is that social media makes us see our weaknesses more than ever. It makes me really, like, when I look at something and I'm like, ugh, you know, I look in the mirror for a second. I'm like, what is making you feel some sort of way about this? Like, what is it in me? And so again, using that trigger moment or that moment of annoyance, even like you said, something as innocuous as following an influencer that's like an aspirational, like, what is it about me that makes me annoyed when I see that girl in her like perfectly curated closet? It's on me. And so I say this even about kids in social media. I can keep the phone away from my kids for 20 years, or I can tell them, honey, what you see is not real. And let's talk about why it's important for you to understand that none of this is real. I'm going to give you we're going to always have our phones. You're always going to be exposed to it. I'm always going to go outside and find someone who doesn't agree with me. What's important is that I feel foundationally strong in who I am and why I am how I am, that I can exist with those people. And that when my kids scroll through or I scroll through, I can understand, okay, this doesn't represent the whole picture. It's probably been filtered. And even if not, God bless her. I hope she has a closet full of Louboutins. You know, it's inner work. And that's what's so funny about this is we're always looking for, oh, what's Meta doing? Meta is like failing us because they're not having filter, you know, flags. And we're seeing stuff. Well, do the work and remind yourself that what you're seeing is not. We can't rely on technology is growing at a rate that we will never be able to keep up with. We as the humans need to be the filter. We need to understand what we're seeing could be AI or is probably filtered or might be misinformation. I hate that word, but let's use it. So the onus is on us now, and it's scary, but it's empowering. And I think that's the attitude that I take as an individual. I use it as an opportunity to be like, okay, Sonni, check yourself for a minute. Do that work that makes you feel not, you know, annoyed or jealous. And to do that for our kids even too, because technology is not going to go anywhere. If anything, it's going to get more pervasive. And so as a counterpart, we have to build up that human side to us, right? That soul side and be strong against it, for lack of a better word.
It's honestly knowledge of this. Like, you need to know the knowledge of understanding what media is. You know, we used to, when I was, you know, in middle school or whatnot, they would come and tell us that this was Photoshopped, this ad, you know, this was removed and whatever. And, you know, they spent a lot of time explaining us about the world of advertisement. But now it's taking time to look at the world of social media and actually growing maybe your personal knowledge of understanding what goes into that being made. What does that look like? And it, you know, it's not so easy. Like, I get triggered by social media on the daily.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying about how it's about looking at yourself and realizing why you're so bothered by it. Because I think we hear the word triggered and we think like, oh, it's their fault that I'm triggered. I'm bothered. But is it really more like it's my fault for being bothered by this?
Right? I mean, and I hate that that's the case because I do want to kick it right back and be like, no, it's on you. But it really is on us. And the cool part about that is that when you do that work, it benefits every part of your life. And it has you show up as a stronger person in your relationships and a more affirmed person as an individual. And like you understand what you believe in and why. And I think the difference between our generation and generations past is that we just have much more opportunity to challenge ourselves than they ever did before. And it's hard, but it's also great because now we know what we can do to grow. And you know, I try to take that approach to it because it's not going to change. And the thought of the world of deep fakes and AI and all of this very scary technology that's mimicking, I know, right? That's like mimicking reality is frankly terrifying to me. And so it's like you control the controllables. So the only thing you can do is control the access that has to your core and work on that. And it sounds so woo-woo, but really ultimately it comes down to that. And by default, you become less triggered because you're working on yourself.
I wanted to ask you how you would define the word triggered. It's so commonly thrown around these days. We kind of use it even like, oh, that person cut me off, I'm so triggered. Like it's very casual. How would you put words to what being triggered really is?
So to me, being triggered is a visceral reaction we have to something someone is saying or even how they're existing in our space. And it can feel like that. Oh, it can feel physical, like your stomach is flipping and you just want to get out there and like defend yourself and be like, wait, you're wrong, because it can feel like that, or it can feel like just what we said before, which is just like a ping of annoyance and just like, you know, that rolling your eyes kind of thing. Yeah. And it's everywhere, right? I mean, I'm not immune to it. I think what gives me the ability to recognize being triggered is having worked professionally in a space where all I did all day was interview people of every different belief system. So I learned how to control my reaction to people. And I learned how to respectfully interact with people that I foundationally disagreed with. And I saw the benefit from that. I saw how much better it was for me, for them. You begin to see on a broader picture. And again, this is a little rose-colored glasses, but I believe this, how that could even impact policy. How great would it be if politicians could come together and focus on the things they agree on and use that as a foundation and build from there. I mean, when I say this is a skill for life, it's for media, of course, and for anybody who's in this space and in this world, but it's for life. And the challenge we have with social media is that we can very easily live in an echo chamber where our belief system is validated. And all we do is we search our little algorithm and it knows what to feed us. Sonny, you're thinking the right thing today. Look what a good person you are.
Yep.
And if you don't seek it out, you're living in essentially a false reality because there's no 100% truth to anything. So while I always say I cover topics and do things to sort of not intentionally trigger, but to expose people to different belief systems, it's not because I'm trying to change people and come over to my way of thinking. Because listen, as much as I stand for both sides of an issue, I have very strong beliefs on many issues. But what people I hope will come to me for is being in a calm enough environment to hear someone out that they might not agree with and just hear them and understand them. You don't have to change your mind. You don't have to walk away a different person. You might have to vote differently or follow different social media accounts after you hear this interview. But what you're learning is that not every person who opposes you is a monster. And there's a human behind it, and they probably feel like they feel for a reason. And I'm still going to probably come back to a lot of my belief systems, and that's okay. But it allows me to function better as a human with other people when I see what's in common rather than what's different.
I love what you're saying about how we're kind of like broadening our community and environment by looking at other things. Because I remember when I was growing up, I went to a middle school, high school that was very much the same thinking. Like everybody's parents, for the most part, had the same political thinking, socially very much thinking. And then when I went to college, I was shocked to find out that was not the only way people thought. And I was very confused because in my head, I'm like, these are bad people. You know, I've never seen this. I never thought, you know, a university would have other people thinking this way. And it was shocking. And it is so similar to what we choose to consume, affecting, you know, what you see the world to be as. So I love actually following other people that I don't agree with just to see what they're saying, or at least watching the TikTok through just to see it.
That's a really good point.
Just to see what's your point of view. I'd love to know. You know, it's curiosity.
It makes you itchy sometimes. I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
It's like, but you do it and you're like, okay. And you know, it either affirms you and helps you understand why you believe what you believe, or it opens you up to another point of view. And like both of those are okay.
And it's almost very interesting how you can vilify one side, and then you are watching a TikTok and you're like, wait, I like actually like what you just said, and I've never liked you before, and I've thought you've said horrible things. It's flooring.
I know.
And yeah, I think there's a lot more area in the gray.
It's such an emotional journey going on social media. Isn't it crazy? Like, I go on there and I'm following, you know, and I have unfollowed people. There have been people who have said things that have been so difficult for me to digest that I'm like, oh, even I can't handle this. But for the most part, my feed stays intact. And sometimes I scroll through and I'm like exhausted by the time I get to the end, because I'm seeing so many things that are like, this is like not at all what I think, and it's really hard, and all I want to do is jump through the screen and be like, hey, but what about this? And blah, 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 blah. And but you know, and it's important too to have boundaries with it. I would never advise someone who's like not feeling 100% like mentally healthy, well, or 90%, you know, to go and trigger themselves. Right, I know, right? Maybe 50%. We'll take 50. But you know, I wouldn't say to make it a way of life where the only thing you're consuming are these you know, belief systems you disagree with. But you know, the exercise of being present and understanding, I think, trying to understand, I should say, only makes us better individuals. Makes me a better journalist. It makes someone who's not in the space just a little more educated on something. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
I wanted to ask you, like, how you kind of, you know, manage your empathy and compassion and anger, like, in these moments. You know, it's very often these days, I feel like we are running into people that have different opinions, and, you know, welcome that conversation with grace, but how do you control your emotions throughout it? It's not an easy skill.
It's not. Years of forcing myself to engage in having to earn a paycheck was a huge help. Understanding that I don't have to betray who I am or how I spend my personal time advocating and being active in the community. Just, you know, I can do an interview, and then when I shut off the microphone and professional Sonni is done, I still go out and support the causes I believe in and donate to them. Being a good, active, respectful listener and engager of conversation does not make me an inactive member of my community. So understanding that those things can coexist. And it comes down to that foundational strength of knowing who you are. It sounds so corny, but knowing who you are. And strangely enough, the more you engage with people, the more you begin to form who you are. And either it's someone providing you with information of what you don't want to be or represent, or someone who does. And it's life, right? You go through, you take bits and pieces of what serves you emotionally, spiritually, professionally, and it all comes together. And I have changed my mind on some big ticket topics, you know, over the course of my life, and I'm sure it'll happen again. And it wasn't because I stuck my head in the ground and was like, I'm right. It's because I continued to engage with people. And I think it's a gift. I really do, to be able to do that. And I say this quite a bit on my podcast, and I believe it to be true, that there are people in the world who I call activators or agitators, like in a positive sense, whose calling in life is to push the needle forward, to push the cart forward, right? That's where things like, you know, civil rights movements come from, and the American Revolution, right? Those are our activators, the founding fathers, like the people who push us. And then there are people who are the mediators or the peacemakers. And I have always just naturally fallen into more of a mediator, let's understand both sides of an issue person. And I think part of it is just knowing who I am as a human. And so while there is certainly space for people who consider themselves activists and activists only, my space in the world occupies more of an understander or the finding the common ground. And one can't exist without the other. Like if there were just a bunch of me's in the world, we would never we would not do much, right? We would feel very validated and empathetic toward one another, but would much change? Maybe not. But if we were all activists and we were all pushing our agenda and our agenda only, we wouldn't get far either. So the beauty of, I think, my show and the way that I try to approach some of this content is that it recognizes the need for both of these types of people in the world. And I think it's fun to discover new things together, whether or not people change their minds.
Yeah, I think that's creating a space for a lot of openness that I think, maybe we've been a little closed off to just even hearing other opinions. So I think you're asking us in a great way to just open the door. Like, we're not saying come on in and sit down, maybe, but we're just saying, hey, check out what's going on out there.
Right.
In terms of people, we were kind of talking about activators and activists. And, this is something that I don't know why my brain runs on all the time. I'm really curious about your feelings about cancel culture. There's definitely people out there in the world who deserve it. And we know who the ones truly are. But, I think, and I'm saying this from my personal opinion, it's created a little bit of a fear of saying the wrong thing and giving a little bit of wish-washy energy. Like, I get behind this podcast mic and I get nervous. I'm going to say something, and I have, and I regret those things. But, we're so scared of a quote unquote cancel. I'd just love to know what your thoughts are.
I generally speaking don't believe in cancel culture. I think it is it is an exercise in futility and ignorance. And I'm not saying the people who cancel people are ignorant. Listen to me, like, trying to qualify everything. Within the bounds of what is quote unquote unacceptable and acceptable in life, I think very few things are outside of the center part of that Venn diagram that are so egregious and so unforgivable that someone doesn't deserve a second chance. I'm a bit of a excessive humanist in that way. Like, I believe in second chances in nearly every realm of life, not all. I think there's some inexcusable crimes, and I think there have been things that have happened in history that can only be looked through one lens or can only be seen through one lens. That being said, cancel culture very rarely produces a productive outcome. To me, a productive outcome is a chance to engage and not understand, because if it's pure hate, that's not ever going to be understood. But so little falls into that category that, to me, it seems like a wasted opportunity to engage in some sort of a discussion. Now, I know people don't agree with that, but the bottom line is, I think we have all said things that highly sensitive people, or maybe even not, could be so offended by that they would think we were in need of cancellation. And I don't think if it came to that, if we were on the other side of it, we would feel so strongly that other people need to be quote unquote canceled. It's like, this is a great example. So I've covered a lot of trials in my career, and I sat in a TV studio for 8 hours at a time with these defense attorneys, and we were covering the Casey Anthony trial. And all I could keep asking them was like, God, how could you ever defend someone accused of such a heinous crime? And she said to me, Sonni, if you were accused of something, and she's like, you're right, probably, maybe not necessarily, I'm not making a judgment call on that, but in some cases, you're right. Some people are just awful humans, and they are probably guilty of the thing, an X percentage of time, they're guilty of the thing that they're accused of. But what if you were that 1%? What if you were the person that was canceled? Would you want everyone to say, no, Marley, I don't care. Whatever you say can't redeem you. What if I were the criminal? What if I were wrong? Like, there is we have to leave space for human error. We have to leave space for systems to fail, and we have to leave space for us to be human and mess up. And I would never want to advocate for something that I would feel like would deny someone that right. And it exists in our justice system for a reason, just as I believe second chances for the most part should exist in our, daily interactions. So I'm not generally a fan of cancel culture for that reason.
Yeah, I'm not really either, because I just think it creates a lot of fear, and there's a lot of people that I think then aren't showing the real colors or just walk in the middle line because that's what they've been told. And I'm like, but they don't really believe it. So I worry it's creating a lot of falsity with people. And, I think, seeing we're talking about media as well, in the social media world, it's created a lot of performative posting. And I'm like, do you really know that? Do you really believe that? Or is it you are scared if you don't post your view on this political matter, you will be canceled? And I'm just like, I want to trust people more that when they say things, they mean them.
Right. And give
that's,
people the space.
I think, why I'm kind of against it.
Yeah. And, and give people the space to arrive at the conclusions that they arrive at. Maybe someone is not jumping on a post right away because they really want to understand it.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. We're in such a difficult time for this issue in particular because people are all over social media these days posting their beliefs, and I respect that. And I have very strong beliefs about things that are happening in the world. And I have posted accordingly when I felt like it and stepped away when I felt like I shouldn't.
Same.
And I want to give people the same freedom to sort of come to their conclusions. But I just think it's dangerous territory when we impose our belief system and what is quote unquote right and wrong on someone else. And it's weird because I did an episode a long time ago about cancel culture in particular. And I interviewed this journalist who studied a lot of these cases of sort of public shaming or cancel culture. And rarely does anything productive come out of anything. I mean, it's just, it makes one side the arbiter of justice and good and makes the other the bad guy. We all know that we all contain a little bit of both of that. Let's not lie to ourselves and pretend like just because you're posting the acceptable things on social media that you stand for what's right in the world. Someone said to me, I posted something on Instagram in tandem with that episode, and they're like, I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in accountability culture. And then I was like, well, what's accountable to you is different. We're so, what does it say about us that we're so eager to publicly flog people for something they believe? And it's very weird. And there, as a Libra, I have a strong sense of justice, and I don't believe that I need to be the person doling out online what is right and what is wrong, and you deserve to be canceled. It's very sticky territory. So yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And with social media, and I'm going all the way talking, I mean, politicians' job is to talk about politics, but I feel like we've really called on actors, influencers, and said, you need to use your platform. And my question is, do they really? I don't know. And then also we go micro. Technically, if you have an Instagram, you have a platform. It's
that's a good point.
Do we always need to be sharing our opinions? I'd love to know.
I love this. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Okay. So for example, what's happening now in the Middle East, Taylor Swift has been one of the people who's been criticized for not speaking up.
Yes.
It is my rule of thumb that if you feel strongly about something, it's post about it, right? That to me shows me that her or she or whoever else may not have posted. And I'm only using this as an example because it's topical. It's happening now.
We all know who she is, and we all know there's issues in the Middle East. And if not, you need some help.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm, I don't want to go down this path and be like, don't extrapolate anything. All I'm saying is that people have criticized her, and that's a fact, for not posting. But what that tells me as a consumer is she doesn't feel qualified for one reason or another, and that's okay. Now, if I were Taylor Swift or a person of that magnitude, and I believe very strongly, I would probably post. But that's my jam, and that's my call, and that's on me. I think you post whatever it is you post with the acknowledgement that what you do will be difficult for some people and will be applauded by others. And this is something that I'm really actually finessing on my feed and my podcast right now, because I have beliefs and think very strongly certain things about things that are happening in the world on many levels, in many arenas. And while it is my job to present both sides, which I always will, I also have found instances where I felt called to share my own personal beliefs, which is a departure. Having worked in journalism, I was not allowed to do that before. The beauty of new media is that you can put that out there and say, okay, this is your fact episode, and this is where you're hearing, and next one is going to be where you hear my thoughts on. I did a whole series on the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And it was a moment of sort of consideration for me where I thought, okay, do I want to come out publicly and like say what I think? Because for many people, it wouldn't be a big deal. But for a working journalist for 15 years, it's difficult to come out and say, hey, I'm very pro-choice and here's why. And understand that I'm alienating people. So I keep that top of mind all the time, is that there are times where I can be like approach things from a two sides sort of factual informational stance. And there are episodes and things that I can do where I can come at it from a more activist or opinionated stance. And you know, the good thing is, and I know you know this from hosting a show yourself, is that your audience comes with you on that journey. And if they feel offended by what I say, they're entitled to switch it off. They're entitled to unfollow. And that's what it is. You know, you post your strong feelings, understanding that you're going to lose some people. That's what happens.
It's tough. And, you know, I think a lot of people look at social media, new media as a very personal platform. And so they take it personally. But, you know, you're putting it out there. You gotta learn to be okay with it.
Yeah. And that's hard, isn't it?
Tough pill to swallow. No, I'm actually horrible at it. So, like, very bad. But, you know, at the same time, like, I'm working, I'm growing too. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's all it's about.
So you do an excellent job, you know, hitting the streets, going up to people, asking them their opinion, you know, and I feel like in our day-to-day around the dinner table, we're running into it a lot more on a very grand scheme that maybe we don't agree with everybody we are close with, friends with. You know, I'd love to know a few like easy tips or tactics that maybe you use to, you know, catchphrases to politely open that conversation at the dinner table or whatnot.
Okay, so I heard this recently, and it's kind of a tweak on something I've always done, but the language is just a little more finessed, and I love it. So when you're having a difficult conversation with someone, whether it's at the holiday table or, you know, it's just a group of friends on a random night, and you hear them sort of explaining or saying what they think, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't agree. Rather than be like, well, I don't get it. Like, why? Why do you feel? That can feel... Speaking of being triggered, this is like so, it can feel a little, it can put a person in a defensive stance. It's kind of can be hurt.
Daunting.
It can be, well, why do you think that, Mar? Like it can feel a little harsh. So I heard this tip and I love it and I'm starting to use it. Rather than asking someone, well, tell me, why do you believe that? I'm starting to change it to, how did you come to feel that way? And it's a little less affronting and like, tell me more. Like, I can't believe you think that. Why do you feel like? It's more like, how did you come to feel that way? Like, what happened in your life that made you? And it's a soft entry into difficult conversations. So I would say that's like one thing you can do. I would also just don't shy away from the conversations. Like, I'm interested in knowing the people around me for who they are. I've had plenty of uncomfortable conversations with friends lately about what's happening in the world. And we may feel differently, and you hear it out and respectfully. And how did you come? Tell me more. And again, it doesn't require you as a human to walk away this changed person. Wow, we now agree. But it gives that person the space and helps them to drop their defensiveness. So I always suggest entering conversations with that question. And then just be human and understand that what I try to keep in the back of my mind is that we ultimately, I do think, agree on so much more than we disagree on. Even if you're talking about the most contentious of issues, I think ultimately people here's what they want in life: peace, health, happiness, and love. Like if we're boiling it down to the least common denominator in life, right? So people, and everything is built on top, laws are built on top of that, and borders are built on top of that. And you know, everything is built on top of these very basic foundational needs that all humans have. And we just interpret them differently, right? So life and health to me doesn't look the same as it does to someone else. So understanding that there's probably a lot you have in common, that even if you're not going to come to terms on this one issue, try to see that, because it helps you it helps you keep your relationships intact. That being said, there could be some people who find something out about someone, a belief that they have, and want to not be their friend anymore, or want to cut communication. And I think we have to respect that too. But you know the boundary as a human, and you know when it's time to stop looking for the common ground and start separating yourself. Listen to that. But there are many ways to engage with people, and those are just some ways to keep it human. you know,
keep it human. Keep it on the table.
keep it on the table.
Sonni, you are so lovely. And, I'm just hoping you can tell all of the listeners where to find you, where you're at, your podcast, and all the good things.
Well, thank you very much for hosting this conversation. It was great. These questions were excellent, and I feel like we got some really cool stuff today. My podcast is called We Gotta Talk. It's on everywhere where you get podcasts. The website is wegottatalk.com, and I do a lot of blogging, kind of breaking down some tips from our experts and guests. So you'll find that there. And on Instagram, I'm at Sonni Abatta, which is SonniAbatta. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Confessions of a Wannabe It Girl. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show. As always, we'll see you next Tuesday.